Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes. From their first to their worst, we're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, me. Yes, just little old me and a handful of movies that are perfect for the always popular spooky season. Yep, we're going to be getting into a handful of Halloween movies that I crush on, so let's get to it. So these aren't your traditional picks because I've never been the biggest traditional horror fan. Oh no ma'am. I grew up with the most metalhead, horror movie loving, Wayne from Wayne's World looking older brother who had blacklight posters and lived to terrify me with his video store rentals. I mean, he's the reason I put heavy shit on my toy box before bed because I swore up and down that my ancient Cabbage Patch doll would murder me in my sleep if I didn't. Maybe that's the cause of my childhood OCD. Who knows? He also almost made me pee my pants when he threw one of those fuzzy bear slippers from the 90s at me after forcing me to watch Critters. So yeah, I was not digging the Freddys, Jasons, or Michaels as a kid. And I talked about this on Monday. Chucky was sort of the first scary movie franchise I eventually could get behind because once I got older, I was able to see how freaking funny that little doll was. Being a little doll though, Chucky didn't make the list last year when I went over my spooky movie crushes. Oh, just a heads up, that's not what this list is about. I would love to go on and on about how hot Jesse Eisenberg is in Zombieland, but this time around it's about the films as a whole and not just one particular character, which changes things. Not too much, but you won't see Zombieland or John Krasinski's A Quiet Place on here. Wonderful movies, but not ones I particularly go back and try and watch each year. Those, well, we're going to talk about some of them now, and the rest you'll have to head over to crushgasmpodcast.com to find out what other movies I love watching during Halloween season. Okay, did I just lie to myself? Yeah, because we're kicking off with a movie I absolutely love, but don't watch as often as I should. Like, I truly think, and I'm not alone in this, that this movie is one of the best to come out in recent years, and I think it was more shocking than anything that it came from the guy whose previous film was about a catnapping. Yes, I'm talking about none other than Jordan Peele's Get Out. What I always sort of not liked about scary movies is what I ironically love about Chucky, and that's how funny they can come across. But while Chucky is trying to bring his stand-up to the table, I'm not sure things like The Purge or Hereditary were trying to lean that way. At least to me. That's because, to me, reality is the scariest thing we experience. You know the movie with Brie Larson that won her the Oscar, where she just like sat in a room with her son or whatever? That was scarier to me than most traditional horror movies because people are taken every day, while it takes Pennywise like 30 years to circle back around. So while Get Out had these sort of out there aspects like harvesting humans and whatnot, the foundation of racism in America, I mean, there is a lot one can unpack with that sentiment, but how he went about it was so creative and it felt really fresh that it did take us all by surprise, and I think it's the reason we expect so freaking much of him now. Which isn't to say Us and Nope were misses, but it's hard to follow something as grand as Get Out in terms of terrorizing an audience, right? Although whenever the other family pops up in the driveway in Us, I'm like, oh my god, no, it's so scary. And while Critters and Demonic Dolls scared me as a kid, for some reason, Elvira was my jam. I lived for the Mistress of the Dark movie and watched it way too much times for my age, but like I've said and written many times before, my mom really didn't deem anything inappropriate for us growing up. With that, if Elvira was playing, I was watching, and in hindsight, what I likely loved as a kid without really even knowing was the outsider concept. I lived for an outcast in a movie, and when Elvira first moved into the town, that's how she was treated. But of course, the locals came to love her. That aside, the most memorable thing about the movie, well, two things. The gas station blowing up. So a bit of a fear because my mom smoked my entire life. And two, the high heel that she threw that stuck in the man's head. I think about that scene 9 out of 10 times whenever I see high heels. So you could say it did make a lasting impression on me. From footwear nightmares to the family-friendly picks that, if still around, Blockbuster would have put them front and center near the kids section in like mid-September, which I'm just going to go in chronological order here and kick off with Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School. It came out when I was still in diapers, but thanks to the glory that was Cartoon Network in the 90s, RIP, and early 2000s, I watched this all the time, especially around this time of year, which I was never a huge Scooby-Doo fan. I'd watch it here and there, and the live-action movies were fun, but there was something I just loved dearly about this little TV movie. Maybe because I liked all the daughters of the classic monsters getting a chance to shine. This probably means that if I were a kid later in life, I would have been absolutely obsessed with those Monster High dolls and or the Descendants. Who knows? But what I do know is at least one streaming service should get the rights to this. Hey, maybe even HBO Max, since they have that new Velma show with Mindy Kaling coming out, which shout out to @SailorSCT Austin on Twitter for letting me know that Mindy's show is not the same as the Scooby-Doo movie that showcased Velma crushing on a new female character. Because I got really confused. I was like, are we really making this much new Scooby-Doo content? And turns out we are. Who knew? But no one's showing Ghoul School, so that's the real crime here. But speaking of new content, sort of some years ago, Jack Black did what Jack Black, I think, does best and made a kids movie based on a Scholastic Book Fair attendee's dream come true, and that is Goosebumps. He played the series author, R.L. Stine, and it was pretty perfect. Anytime a kids movie from today feels like a wacky kids movies from the 90s, I'm all about it, because the world, it pretty much sucks, let's be real, and kids should have more than YouTubers and apps to grasp onto when adults fail to make good choices about basic human rights, science, and so forth and so on. Sorry, I will get off my little soapbox and continue on about Goosebumps by saying it did not disappoint. Anyone who has read any of those Goosebump books couldn't help but watch this with hearts in their eyes. They delivered the monsters, had an endearing story with R.L. Stine and his daughter, and even a freaking twist at the end that even I didn't see coming, that I really should have as an adult watching this, not like an 8-year-old. But I didn't see the twist coming at all. But it, nevertheless, love. The sequel, on the other hand, it was fine, but didn't capture what the previous one had done. I think they were just going for a cash grab, which is fine. They needed to make their money. No hate there, but the first one was chef's kiss. Which, let's talk about my final pick for this episode, and that's a movie that really has surpassed being just a movie. It's a way of life for some, and that's Hocus Pocus. I remember last year around this time, I was at my mom's cleaning her entire trailer, minus my brother's room and bathroom, because that would have taken a whole other week. And one night, Hocus Pocus was on, and my nephew had not seen it. He was 9 years old, and he had not seen Hocus Pocus, to my surprise. And because I expect every child to have seen it at least several times by that age. But nope. I mean, I was about to call CPS on my brother, because really, come on, that's bad parenting. But then again, I'd been the first to show my nephew The Sandlot earlier that year when he was with me in July. But, you know, I'm really stepping up and doing what needs to be done so the kid grows up with the correct knowledge, you know? Anyways, what I've always loved about Hocus Pocus is that it's pretty straightforward. This is what I loved about most movies from the 90s. Don't get me wrong, I think it's pretty interesting the way Kevin Feige and everyone at Marvel, you know, plan out these movies and these TV series for years and years, and they're able to spin a ton of webs and universes together. But at the end of the day, no one truly needs a 3-hour movie, especially for a kid. You know, give me an hour and a half and I'm good. Cuts out the BS, if you ask me, to which Hocus Pocus had none. Other than the cat being named Thackeray instead of Zachary, which is something we all freaking thought, right? Don't even try and claim you knew it was Thackeray. But yes, this is a movie you truly cannot have Halloween without. And I do think it goes hand in hand with Michael Myers' lengthy series of films in which the bitch will not go down. Should we talk about Hocus Pocus 2 though real quick? Because here's the thing. I think that the original is still so great to me and many around my age because we watched it as kids. And when you're 6, 7, 8, and so on, there is still this sense of magic in you that makes those stories pop harder than when you're a grumpy 30-something. So I think that if I were a kid watching Hocus Pocus 2 today, I would have loved it. But as an adult, I had some issues. The main one being that it felt too long. The other being that the shop owner really put everything into his regular customer being a virgin that lit a whole new black candle. That was weird. Am I the only one that thought that was really weird? However, despite the issues, the first handful of minutes where we sort of got a prequel, that was golden. I was thrilled to see the OGs back, but honestly, this could have been an hour and a half of the Sanderson sisters as kids learning witchcraft and whatnot, and I would have been okay with that. And I've said this a few times, but I do think that Disney Plus will try and bank on the popularity of the younger sisters and make a series, which I feel like we need a campy witchy show because the new Sabrina was too dark. Literally, I stopped watching because I could not see what was going on, and I But anyway, that's it. And remember, the rest of the list will be up the day after this. So if you're listening the day this dropped, hold tight. Anytime after that, it's definitely already up on crushgasmpodcast.com. And before I scurry away to my mental cottage in the woods, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about my Halloween movie crushes. And everyone, you can find all of Crushgasm's information below. And until next time, as always, keep crushing it.